I think we didn't know fundamentally what we had done or what we were stepping into. I don't think I'd ever been to a single tech networking event, so I just didn't have the articulature. I didn't kind of have any visibility. And so we were getting inbounds from Sequoia and Tiger Capital and all these sorts of people like, oh, okay, these people seem nice. You know, a lot of like interest. And I think we were just like, how are they finding out about us? I think we started to get some inbound phone calls. And so we had a huge amount of interest and we didn't realize that that was out of the norm. And so we had no really way to navigate it. We didn't know any other founders or any other people in tech. So we were just kind of like, we don't need investment. Thank you very much. And then after a few months of that, we're like, maybe let's just consider this.
Welcome to Startups Decoded, the show that gets real about what it takes to build a successful startup. I'm Andy Walsh, 2 times exited founder, strategist, and your host. Each week I talk with top founders, investors, and operators to unpack the plays that drive real traction, not just headlines. If you're building something bold, this is where you'll get the honest insights to scale with clarity and confidence. Let's keep growing together. Hit subscribe and share with your community. It would mean the world to me. Hello and welcome back to Startups Decoded. Super excited today to have a huge global startup in the form of Linktree. For those of you who don't know it, you need to get out and live and breathe life a bit more because Linktree is everywhere. And the guest today we have is Nicky, who's co-founder and chief creative officer. Welcome to the show, mate.
Very, very excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me. What an intro, though. Don't know if I can live up to that, but I'll do my best.
Well, it's something that, there's things in the world of digital you just take for granted. Things that you use all the time that just become part of your experience that you're having on your cell phone or other things on a daily basis. And I feel that Linktree is just part of that vocabulary. And we'll go into that evolution a bit today. But as someone who is living right at that intersection of culture and creativity more broadly with creators, you're seeing and hearing all the things that people are doing to monetize what they create, whether they're a musician, whether they're someone who just likes to talk about shoes, whatever that is, you're a place that people come to do that. And you've got this really fascinating space where not only are you building a product based on insights that you see, what creators need to be able to build a career is also coming at you pretty hot. So you've got these 2 sides of the same coin that you have to meet expectations on. So to set this up, I'd like to go back a little bit and I'd love to talk about the early days of Linktree, which started in your agency Bolster, which is where I met yourself and your 2 co-founders. And I know this story is out there, but I think it's fascinating about what you were doing and what you were building for a client and then how that became the Linktree that we use today.
Yeah, I mean, God, it was a while ago. I'll do my best to retrieve my memory. So I think it was 2015. Yeah, even winding further back than that, I've always worked with Alex and Anthony. I was sort of studying full-time at uni. My co-founder, Alex needed just like a cheap designer to bop out some posters for the club that he ran. And I had no sense of how to price myself. So I was a very cheap resource. So he was very pleased with the situation. So was I to an extent. And then just over that time, getting to know Alex, seeing his entrepreneurial spirit and just like complete lack of fear and his appetite for risk versus my very conservative, I'm not very critical of my own work kind of designer. That was just an interesting juxtaposition. So we worked together and then I just had this itch, wanted to move to London. So did all that for a few years. And Alex and Anthony were like, hey, we're going to start this thing, Bolster, this like marketing agency. And I was kind of like, cool, you guys have fun with that. And then a year later, they were like, yo, this thing is pumping. Like we need a creative arm. I think over that time they'd been exposed to other creatives, which may not have like the most sort of business acumen or kind of understand pragmatism versus like perfection in design. I sort of can straddle both of those worlds. So I came back semi-reluctantly from London and we gave this thing a proper go. So we started this little agency. I was leading the creative arm, working effectively for music clients in Australia, massive festivals, also all the way down to like really niche musicians that really couldn't afford big agencies. And I think we were always about spending less and maximizing the impact. So not wanting to spend too many dollars on ads or saying the same message to like a big broadcast of people. We were really, how do we make $1 feel like 10? And how do we like really find your niche audience and deliver creative that sort of like, activates them? So yeah, we were just like basically heads down, working 7 days a week. We lived together in this awful little house. It wasn't awful, but there's trauma just floating around there. But we got a lot of stuff done. So we would work, 7 or 8 a.m. in the morning till 7 or 8 at night, come home. I'd cook the dinner because I'm like the maternal one of the three. And then we would just sort of like talk about strategy and talk about challenges we were having with the team or things we needed to do. And we were just able to like condense 2 or 3 years into one effectively. And we're building hundreds of websites. Literally, I think we shipped something like 300 or 400 websites in 1 year. We built our own CMS product. We built our own kind of like building blocks. And so we were doing websites for festivals as big as Splendor in the Grass, which is like Australia's kind of equivalent to Coachella, all the way down to just a small independent musician that had like $500 or $600 to spend. And we would try and like have that scaled offering and really make like the larger clients help us be able to kind of support the emerging talent. And, we really believed in like emerging talent and helping them reach the same audiences. So yeah, long story short, we were heads down on this agency thing, came from a music world. We had no idea what tech was. We had no idea about VCs. We had no idea about any of this stuff. Like our meetings were kind of conducted in the side of stage in a noisy festival. And there was probably alcohol involved, which wasn't the worst thing. And yeah, we built this little tool. It was essentially just like scratch our own itch. We were working with all these musicians that had just so many stakeholders that they were fighting for this very small piece of real estate. So you had the touring, like the tour that they're about to embark on, their merch provider, their actual website, streaming platforms, some brand deal. Everybody's trying to fight for position. And we recognized the website just wasn't cutting it because they're effectively just hard to manage. They require, a whole bunch of people to like get them live, and you're going to call the developer to push the stuff live. And they're also expensive. And so Alex walked in one day with this kind of grin on his face. He's always got, when I see that look, I'm like, oh, okay, this is going to be a lot of work coming down the pipe. And he's like, what if we just made this link thing that linked to other things? Like it's got the website and the socials and all these sorts of things. And effectively, yeah, we just kind of prototyped it. 6 hours later, had something like relatively workable. And then 2 weeks later, shipped it to a state of readiness where you could log in and add content, and we just gave it to our clients. That was kind of it. That was like the beginning of the beginning, I suppose. Yeah.
It's fascinating. And if you were to tell that same story, but it wasn't intentional to start a business, it wasn't intentional to be where you are today, but it's that true insight in the sense of a problem that people are facing. And if you were to get advice from any VC today about assessing that, they would say, who's your audience? What problem are you solving? And then what's the product you're going to do that? And you would tick all those boxes and immediately you would gain interest, but people still struggle to solve a genuine problem. And your collective insights of all the people that you were dealing with who in their own right had thousands, if not millions of people that were engaging with them on a daily basis. So you need to understand their world as well, in the sense of what are the things that they're going to need. So that is an evolution within the product that I'm fascinated to explore a bit today too, as far as how it went from doing a little bit of client work with artists into now being the number one tool for that single click link around the world. And for me, I know, Alex and Anthony really well. And I remember the day that I read that they got the first funding round, which from memory was around 20 million, I think, to scale it at that first pass. And then I feel like the second round came not long after that as well.
Sort of somewhere in the realm of like 45 million. And then very quickly, I mean, frankly, at the time, as I said, we came from a music world. And so I think we didn't know fundamentally what we had done or what we were stepping into. I don't think I'd ever been to a single tech networking event. So I just didn't have the articulature. I didn't kind of have any visibility. And so we were getting inbounds from like Sequoia and Tiger Capital and all these sorts of people like, oh, okay, these people seem nice. A lot of like interest. And I think we were just like, how are they finding out about us? I think at the time we'd sort of hit, this is early 2020 and sort of late night, and we started to get some phone calls. And so we just had a huge amount of interest and we didn't realize that was out of the norm. And so we had no really way to navigate it. We didn't know any other founders or any other people in tech. So we were just kind of like, we don't need investment. Thank you very much. And then after a few months of that, we're like, maybe let's just consider this, because the AWS bills were getting very expensive as well. So like, we're either gonna have to shut this thing down because it's like eating away our profit, or we're gonna have to like give this thing a crack. So yeah, we went through that raise very quickly. Flew to America March 2020, if you can recall what happened very like weeks later. We got
Quite
the
an
kind
important
of the last
milestone in
flight.
the world.
Yeah, there's a little bit going on. We kind of knew there was something happening. We're like, it feels a little pandemic-y, but like we were sort of optimistic. Flew over there, had a whole bunch of conversations and kind of realized we'd spoken to VCs in Australia and not to discount Australia by any means, but there is like a more conservative sort of view on things and more expectations they have or more signals that they expect in terms of like cash flow and you know those sorts of things, revenue. Came to America and it was a vastly different environment, and I think that like really jolted us into okay, this thing is real. There's some incredible like interest where we're like about to ride the crest of this wave, and so that raise happened. We flew home, kind of got the last plane out of America before they locked it all down, locked Australia down. And we conducted that raise sort of on Australian hours in our stinky little house. Alex having these meetings, I'm cooking him breakfast, like just because we couldn't, we were in isolation and did that first sort of a round ish. And then, yeah, a couple of weeks later, we had all of this other interest. And so we sort of like open it up to a second amount of money, a second amount of investors. And a big reason for that was not pure a cash grab by any means. It was more around like the people that we had met, the strategic investment, the doors that we felt that they could open, but also the perspectives they had on the product and the way that they could articulate what we had actually built. Because I don't think we were able to simply clarify what it is we had done or what the potential was. It was like, yeah, it's this thing, it could do these sorts of things. And when you have this kind of vision clarified and sort of spoken to you, and you realize they understand it even more so than maybe you do. We felt that kind of immediate connection, and we're like, all right, let's partner with these people, and we got the second wave of investment, and then yeah, it all went crazy from there, really.
I can't think of a good way to describe it. Let's call it the Cinderella story. Like if you were a young startup founder and that had happened and you got people reaching out to you to invest and you're turning them down, like people today would love to be in that situation. And I think it's a result of a lot of things. And then going back to the start, it's why I made the comment about it's kind of ubiquitous, right? As far as Linktree and the name itself. And it seems so obvious as a solution, but fast forward to today, and it's a far more expansive product as far as what you can do with it, how you can monetize it, etc. And what I really want to cover today is a little bit around that product evolution and listening to creators who rely on these platforms to build careers, engage their audience, etc. How that's changed over the previous years, and then obviously in 2025 we're having this huge shift in growth in all sorts of platforms that are enabled by AI that allow more people to create all sorts of things in different formats. And the world is changing quickly. And I think that in itself is a really good place to start. And our audience on this podcast are primarily founders. And I'm sure there's a lot of people who are curious about the tech stack that's available right now. Where are the patterns of usage? What are the things that are getting steam? And then how does that tie back to Linktree? Because ultimately, people come to you, they have a page, and they can click out to anywhere else, but they can also monetize off that now too. So I'll throw to you as far as thinking about the simplicity at the start and what you were doing. I'd love for you to talk to now a little bit about the product, just big picture as far as what are the types of things that people can do.
Yeah, I mean, I can start at the start, which is we kind of built this thing to just solve a simple problem, and with yeah, simple solution. Didn't want to sort of like throw too much embellishment or bells and whistles because frankly, we had these like very over architected websites that were like super powerful, but oftentimes we would sort of look at the data because Alex, my co-founder, is just like so data obsessed, and you'd look at kind of people are dropping off here or this page isn't performing. And so we've always had that kind of lens on performance and really wanting to like have as much impact, all the effort and energy and money you're spending, like, is it actually returning from a marketing perspective, a revenue perspective? And so we were seeing these like very big brand immersive websites that looked really beautiful and impactful, just not converting as much as this like very simple utilitarian brutalist kind of like link stack, which to my little sensitive designer heart was a bit upsetting because I think there is really beauty in those like brand immersive web experiences. There is still a place for them, but I can fully understand the cost versus the effort versus impact. And so once we sort of realized like you don't need a traditional website, you don't need kind of navigational structures. It's like if you want somebody to click on these certain things, just put them in front of them and people intuitively know to click. So in terms of like functionality, the first iteration was just buttons, some colors. That was kind of it. And we kind of just like dusted our hands and went back to work. And then, we gave it to a few clients. I think Flume, the musician, who's an Aussie musician for those playing at home, gave it to him. And then we gave it to a couple of other music clients, and just like, we really thought this thing was to solve a musician or a music related problem. And once we sort of put it out into the world, we were getting, 10 and 15 signups a day. Quite excited, like, oh shit, people are just like figuring this thing out, finding it out themselves. That immediately started to show us that all these other verticals were sort of seeing this and realizing, okay, this solves my problem here. So I think it was like our local council in Melbourne, Australia, which is where I'm based and where this thing grew. They used it to sort of direct traffic from their socials to, you have a complaint, or here's your like local council information. Here's our website. Here's how you email this person. So they were really using it as this sort of like router to, rather than sending somebody through their website, which you can kind of bounce, you don't know where the hell the thing you're trying to find is. They really recognize these are the 4 or 5 things people care about, put them in the Linktree, and so just like really clearing the clutter between clicking and that the consumer like converting or reaching their goal. That was the early days. And so as we started seeing more and more people and users that we had never intended or never built for, never even thought about or considered, we then, and I'm sad to tell you that we're still in this sort of position, having to prioritize what you build. And you've got this kind of like one size fits all solution, which is just, this is what it is. It's very simple. It's a list of links and sort of, has a very constrained feature set, to people begging for all these integrations and new features. I want videos. I want to be able to like sell things. I want to be able to add my music. And you kind of having to retrain your brain to be like, this isn't what I thought it was. This thing is much bigger. And then the hard part is you have all of these like very deeply verticalized people asking for very deep features, and you're having to kind of trade off one against the other. You've got musicians that are like begging you to integrate with merch partners so I can display my merch, or wanting sort of geo based audience attributes. So if somebody in New York is able to see a version of your Linktree with your merch provider in the US, tickets for the New York show, versus your fans in Australia who may have a totally different sort of experience of that Linktree, because it's not relevant for them to be seeing tickets to your, US based merch. So that has been a real tricky journey. And I think today we're still learning thematically, what do we build to kind of like serve the masses, and where do we go deep? Where do we sort of go, serve specific users that are propping up our revenue and sort of like pushing the platform along? It's a real tricky dance. And I don't know, I think every day we feel like we're getting closer to it, but that trade-off and prioritization is really, really tough.
Love to be able to just broaden that out a little bit. So for context, when you talk about some of the people that are using your product, can you just give us like 3 or 4 examples about the caliber of people that are on Linktree today?
It's fascinating to me. Despite being very like grateful and kind of humbled by these incredible, huge celebrities and household names. So like Selena Gomez, Sabrina Carpenter, Billie Eilish, like all these amazing musicians that are just like killing it. I also get equally as excited by when I find Linktrees in the wild, and it's like my local pizza shop uses it, the local bakery that I go to uses it. And what that tells me is, obviously we have sort of like creative partnerships that do an amazing job to kind of build these relationships and build features and trust and brand for these big creators, like these worldwide celebrities. But the fact that my local pizza shop and my local bakery and these cafes that I go to have found Linktree, it means they're utilizing this tool. They've seen a solution in it. And that is really meaningful to me, when just like an average person that has some kind of an issue, that can't afford a website or it's too much admin to maintain it, and they find Linktree and they use it and they set it up. That's really humbling things. Yeah, honestly, the spectrum is kind of endless. The last US administration used Linktree for to kind of like for avenues across social to get their social audiences to certain policies and pages on their website. So rather than routing their social following to the government website, they were using Linktree to just like streamline that, which was fascinating. And then we even had the royal family for a little while, and then you'd have Playboy. And so it's just this constant mix of constantly being surprised and really intrigued by, why is this person using Linktree in this way, like trying to understand the behavior. And one example that Alex uses, and myself as well, The Guardian, which is a publication, used it. I mean, like, you've got probably a massive team of incredible, web developers and designers and engineers. why are you using this solution? And what we found was not everybody has access to influence these web pages or like content sort of spaces. And so the social media manager was realizing, okay, what is tracking and trending on social is vastly different to the homepage on The Guardian. And so for them to have that, like the agency and empowerment to shift and shape the Linktree based on what they think their audience is going to click on, they were able to just like streamline people and direct them to what's, you know, tracking and interesting on social. So just fascinating. Sometimes it's about the person within these companies that is using it. It's about, yeah, people just seeing like less of a need for a traditional website. But yeah, it's a wild time, I'll tell you.
And the reason that I bring that question up too is very deliberate, because the people that use it, obviously you want to retain those customers, and retaining those customers is not just keeping them happy, it's also keeping all of the people that follow those people. So Selena Gomez wants to make sure that she can engage the people that follow her and are passionate about what she's doing. So she's getting feedback from all of those people too, maybe not directly herself, but her team are looking at that and going, hey, Nikki, here's what we're hearing. Our fans want this, make that happen. And it would be hard to sit there and talk to those people and say, it's not in our priority list right now for shipping these new features, versus someone who's your local pizza shop, as you said, that is using it and finding ways to optimize what they're doing too. It's so broad. So thinking about then where you're at today and prioritizing feature releases, how does that come to life for you in the sense of how people use it now and then how you can continue to grow that?
Yeah, it's been a real journey, as I said, when you have a lot of very passionate people that have an opinion on what, you know, they've got like massive problems that they're trying to solve across their funnel. One of them could be, as I mentioned earlier, they have sort of global audiences that meet them expecting different things. So I'm in Europe, and on your Linktree, I'm seeing something that's completely unrelated to me or something I can't access. And so a big part of how we think about Linktree is not only the people that use us, but their audiences and that the experience of the visitor to the Linktree. So we're always kind of filtering things through both lenses. I think if you listen to linkers, is what we call our users. If you listen to them, they have opinions on what they need, but oftentimes it may not be what's good for the visitor. And sometimes visitors have sort of slightly different priorities or goals in mind, where they don't care that you have a sale on, or they don't care that you've released this new music. They want to buy tickets to the new show, or they want to buy merch, or, you know, so trying to find like alignment between those two users is always quite tricky. But in terms of prioritization, I think we've been looking like thematically across the internet and across creation and creators, what we can build to kind of like serve them relatively equally. So a lot of that is like through integrations. We've built sort of systems where we can plug in a whole bunch of different apps. So when you connect your Instagram, we can sort of bring in and fetch all your latest content. So you just don't have to like go to Linktree to manage it as manually as you once may have needed to. And same for TikTok. And we're looking at kind of like deeper integrations and relationships with other social platforms. A hard part there as well is there's so many new ones that emerge. So AirChat was one that was like popping off a little while ago. And for us, it's like, okay, we have this very regimented roadmap. We have a whole bunch of things that we want to do this year. But because of the speed of culture and consumption and social and marketing, it's sort of changing every other day. And so you're constantly having to have your finger on the pulse of like, is this thing about to hit? Do we need to be at the forefront of this? Do we need to build relationships and build an integration? Or is this thing kind of only going to serve a very niche part of our audience and we just shouldn't spend the time? So I'd love to say that we have like an absolute perfect equation, but a lot of it is looking at the data and seeing, okay, how many of our users overlap with this body of work? Obviously, there's a revenue cost, like how much energy and effort are we going to put into this to how much revenue we can expect back. And we've made some really good decisions. We made some bad ones. We sort of chased a whole bunch of NFT work. And at the time, it was like the biggest thing. We felt like there was a lot of creators that were very excited about it and being able to kind of have more ownership. But again, I think it was a very niche side of our Linktree audience were really excited by it. But the masses, it was just too early. So I think we've learned a lot of lessons about being really thoughtful who our users are, who our core users are. To your point around, you know, you may have Selena Gomez and a lot of these management companies have really stern expectations or needs, and they will often make a decision not to use the platform because we may not be able to sort of serve those needs based on audience capture. They want to use their very proprietary newsletter system, or there's some sort of like security thing that they need to to abide by. So we worked very closely with the last administration to make sure Linktrees were compliant for all of their sort of standards. So yeah, sometimes sadly you have to say no to some people and that may decide to leave. But our real focus is like, who is our core audience and how do we just like serve them the best we can? And so yeah, effectively the way that we're some of the major initiatives that we've like embarked on, at least in the last year, has been monetization is such a huge one. And monetization is constantly changing and shifting. Courses are quite prominent now. So a lot of people are looking at like ways to monetize, building this audience. The audience has this expectation or like this value of what you're delivering, and then sort of amplifying that through real dedicated courses. So that's like one interesting one. Then we're also looking at sort of like this affiliate marketing and sort of curation of taste and products and people earning money off that. And so we saw this trend years ago and really we're like, is now the time? Are we the right company to actually go and chase this down? And so for a long time, we kind of just held off and decided now's not the time. But after enough of our creators were sort of begging for these monetization tools, wanting to be able to curate a shop on Linktree, we decided it was time. And I think we underestimated just the sheer scale of what that undertaking was. So it's building relationships with brands, building a sales arm, and building all the technical systems behind that. And so we've launched that and seen really great traction. But again, the trade-off is focusing on this means you're not focusing elsewhere. So the next kind of initiative that we're currently working on now is about audience ownership, which again, how do you trade off when people are begging to monetize, but they're also really impassioned and afraid of this audience that they've sort of generated and built doesn't fundamentally feel like theirs to own because of, platforms and algorithms and all these sorts of things. So you're like, yeah, I get you. We are building this thing, but having to prioritize monetization first. Now we're looking at sort of audience ownership because yeah, I think if you remember the TikTok ban, the looming TikTok ban, I think it really made a lot of people kind of acutely aware that they don't fundamentally own the space. It's everything's somewhat rented. And so the ability for them to capture an audience and then be able to like directly speak to them as they decide, that that's clearly like a need that we never really saw too much of in the early days from just like the general populace. Proficient marketers have always known the value of capturing an email kind of list. But then once the TikTok ban started to hit, we really saw like that long tail of people being like, I want to be able to own my audience. I want to be able to send notifications and emails. So we're working on that at the moment. And then later on in the year, there's a whole bunch of other shiny stuff. But yeah, it's a wild journey. I don't know how much great advice I can give other than just hold on and try and find your like tether to what you're there to do. I don't know. It's a tricky
No,
one.
without directly giving advice, you've definitely shared that process because the typical assumption that you make as a product manager is that retention is driven by making sure that existing features are working, they're effective, and that people get what they signed up for. And then typically new features are a great acquisition strategy to bring on new users for new purposes, and they discover the breadth of the tools that you have already within the product. So trying to have a hierarchy as far as what you can do in the time that you've got and those considerations and managing expectations as well. But flip to the other side, and I think that's you almost went there quite beautifully at the end. As far as the world that we live today, there's so many new platforms for content creation, distribution, social media is completely changing. And the world that we now operate in requires you to be really adaptive. And you talked about who can plug into your platform natively now as far as like who you add to the stack, because if someone just popped off and like if you were to say, I can't think the exact year, I'm going to call it 2018, whenever it was, TikTok started to come from nothing to all of a sudden huge market share, like 12 months difference, you may not have had it. And then 12 months later, you're like, this is probably the number one, like we need to have on our platform right now. But businesses that are starting today, I have a lot of conversations with investors and founders. I'd say there's going to be a lot that we won't even see again in 12 months time. So for you as a person who's tapped into culture through creators, but also through consumers who are just wanting to get access to all the things in a simple and streamlined fashion, you're sitting on this amazing insight. So you have to be able to be a barometer on both the data and validation, but also cultural trends. And like you talked about NFTs before, who are a bit of a hot flash in the pan, and they still exist. And it was important for them to happen. They had their moment to substantiate them. But looking at that now, What are some of the things that you see as far as platforms that people are using for growth? And I'm going deep on Substack at the moment as an example, and for me that's important for owning my own data as well. But what else are you seeing in the mix now as far as the things that people are looking to integrate into Linktree?
Yeah, I was going to say Substack's such a fantastic example. They're also really great people. We've sort of spent some time with them. Just an impressive business, and they have a really high bar for craft. So props to all the team there. It's interesting. We sort of see we have like we're constantly monitoring what our users are saying, and so that's whether that's through like research and having conversations or little moments in the product where we're asking for feedback. And a lot of the tools kind of remain the same, interestingly. A lot of them are wanting to just like integrate with salon booking or, booking integrations and these sorts of things. And that hasn't really changed. We've got a few integrations built to sort of satisfy that need, but there is also a limit to how deep our functionality is. We don't profess to be able to like power your entire end-to-end ecom business and run fulfillment, but we'll build you a good enough sort of entry level Shopify kind of experience. And then when you're ready to graduate, off to Shopify you go. That's kind of the role that we see we play, a bit of like the impartial kind of centralized hub that's however the creator wants to show up, whatever tool stack that they're kind of looking to use, we want to be able to integrate relatively well. So right now we're focusing on kind of audience, as I mentioned, audience capture and ownership and being able to like send notifications and SMSs. So we're looking at like, okay, what are our current users using? Some are using the MailChimps of the world. I mean, then others just simply can't afford that, some of the costs. So we're looking at like really small providers, or what can Linktree build as just like the gateway, simple one-click email kind of experience. Because what we learn is just the sheer breadth of our user base. There's creators that are monetizing, businesses that see the value in these like monthly subscriptions, and then you have people that are like really haven't monetized in a meaningful way or are on the path. And every single dollar that they're spending on their sort of tech stack, as you mentioned, they really are sort of quite considerate with it, and they sort of need to see that value to continue to invest. So we're being kind of thoughtful with, yes, these integrations and businesses may be the biggest, but how do they relate to our audience? And are they willing to spend $90 on some integration, or should we be going for something that's somewhat middle road? So yeah, email capture, we're looking at ways to like store your audience in Linktree, and then you can port them out or communicate to them, with the MailChimp's, Klaviyo kits of the world. In terms of content generation, we acquired a social planning tool that has some semblance of AI generation within it. But in terms of the creative perception on AI tools, there's a bit of a divide naturally, I'd imagine, where people are like, I don't want to know anything about it. And they're very reluctant and resistant to it. And then there are others that are wanting to have sort of captions and edits, integrations where they can like port content they're creating into Linktree and beyond. So again, it's kind of like we have to be very sensitive to the perception. If we go all in on AI tooling, does that isolate and irritate and exclude some of our creators that are quite worried about this space? Or do we sort of find what are the more productive tools that they could be using to like help propel their content forward? And part of that is like looking at bundling. So we have a Linktree Pro subscription, and maybe we partner with like a Descript or something like to help you kind of chop together your podcast content and then sort of like streamline the creation, but not taking away that authentic human creation. It's just like trimming all the administrative sort of tools. So yeah, it's an interesting sort of space where we aren't just going after like the big ticket create platforms. We're really looking at like what would our users resonate with the most, and yeah, just keeping our finger on like what's new. And there's just new tools every other day, so it's really difficult to know if this is like a utility or something that's just like a little sugar hit. Yeah, so I don't really have a clear lens on how to be the best at that. We're just sort of monitoring what people say, what they're actually using, and just like looking at general trends and seeing if is this thing just a flash in the pan. I think we're a little gun shy on some of those things.
And I don't think anyone would put down even $10 to forecast what the world looks like in 12 months' time as far as digital content creation and distribution, because it's never been so fragmented. There's so many platforms doing sometimes one simple thing, but not everything. Someone like a Zapier comes in that can trigger a series of actions across different platforms, but it becomes unwieldy to a certain degree as well, where you have 15 subscriptions to try and create something, and you're in the middle of that process to a certain degree. And I'd imagine that there's tension, as you were saying, between do we just become a conduit between customer and other platforms somewhere else, or do we build it ourselves? And then you live in this gray area of, do you become a website that has all these plugins, or are you standalone? I assume that there's a lot of philosophical and practical conversations that happen between you guys.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. And I think it can become very easy to just bloat the feature because you're hearing from everybody, I don't want another subscription. I just want to do everything within Linktree. And I think I can't remember, but Alex shared me this article about the complexity convex. So naturally products just become more bloated as they sort of move up in sort of maturity and life cycle. And I think to an extent, we have suffered a little bit of that where we've probably added a whole bunch of sort of features, and I think strategically, they're all the right ones to be adding, but I don't think we've absolutely scaled as best as we could the product experience, the ability to kind of like dynamically surface these features to the right audience. So knowing this person is a restaurant and sharing them like a specific user path that's only really showing them content and sort of features that are related to their business. Right now, it's kind of everything for everybody. And I think that can be quite overwhelming. I think people are more expectant of personalized experiences and only being shown relevant things, at least within product experiences. So we're spending a lot of time now to just make it a lot simpler to navigate the product and actually firstly know that there's features that you need or you're looking for, and then helping you kind of like use them as best as you can. But I think to answer your question around how much functionality we put in this thing, it is really tough. I think what we're now learning is we haven't really had a clear opinion to the business or to the team that, yeah, we may be wanting to help somebody monetize, but like here is our thin wedge, or here is our sort of unique perspective, or what Linktree can uniquely do to solve this problem. We're not going to try and build out every single feature set. We're not going to try and make it so you can have like all these hectic kind of email flows, but we'll help you kind of capture your audience and send an email. And then anything you need to do beyond that, you'll graduate out to these bigger tools and you're likely willing and able to pay for them. So I think we're kind of like the junior school version of some of these features to help somebody like test the waters. A lot of these people are sort of, they may not have yet monetized their audience consistently. And so for them to spend all of this time and, maybe get a course that's like fully end to end and they've spent hours and hours and $100 a month, where we've partnered with a provider called Kajabi to help bring that experience into Linktree so people can kind of have a taste of it, see if their audience responds to it. So it's really about like the gateway into the next step. And I think we see ourselves as a bit of a steward for these creators and find them at whatever step they're at now. And maybe that's just to have a link tree with just your content. And then, okay, I'm ready. I'm seeing in my analytics, I'm getting traction. Okay, maybe it's now time to kind of start to grow that audience base and send newsletters. Or maybe I should be selling my first digital product to see if I can monetize them. Maybe I graduate into courses. So we're really looking at how do we be more of that steward and not sort of like push you when you're not ready, be more of a supportive kind of player. And just one thing I wanted to talk about in terms of like you've been speaking about what does content creation and delivery and consumption look like? I don't know personally, but I'm looking at trends and, I spent a lot of time with ChatGPT and they do a lot of voice calls with it. So you can just like talk to it as a bit of a therapist or just to help you pass through like some challenging, product conversations or whatever that is. And I'm realizing that I may not be, visually looking at a lot of content ongoing. It may be just an amalgamation that I'm like listening to. So even just how content is being serviced or surfaced to may change. And so we're really looking at, okay, what if Linktree is not the sole destination? It could be in one instance, but the content on a Linktree may be surfaced in so many other ways within, AI search engines. So we're really thinking about what does that look like for the future of Linktree? Is it more of like a content management system, and how your content is sort of surfaced across the web really depends on how that sort of changes. But Linktree remains this place where you're sort of managing, your centralized link management. So it's an interesting space, a lot of chin stroking and head scratching. We're trying not to rush into anything, but just sort of be methodical and make sure we're building for that future and like acutely aware of what's changing.
And what's your current customer base, total number? It's quite large.
It's pretty big, upwards of 70 million link trees out in the world. So quite a few.
Yeah, and for context too, like it's very much B2B to C, right? So it's not those 70 million people that are seeing this, it's 70 million people plus all of their audience. So the amount of people that go through Linktree on a monthly basis, I assume is would be obscene as far as that volume.
Yeah, it's in the bill. It's in the 1.5 to 1.8 billion, give or take, unique visits a month. So it's pretty significant. I mean, yeah, just going back to like the early days where we kind of built this thing, in the kind of garage era, not really knowing too much about sort of servers, and then the scale that we hit, having to like really drastically hire and staff up a team that knew how to like deliver, servers that could handle all of that traffic. It's been a massive journey in that regard, which I could talk about team structures and just like proactive planning and then reactive, like, oh shit, we have to figure this out. So yeah, I could probably give some advice or some trauma on those sorts of things.
Yeah, I had one episode talking about product and the sense of like how you build a product. It was very foundational kind of conversation. But when you're thinking at the scale that you're talking to, I've got some big ones coming up actually, which I'd love to talk to like a CTO type person as far as what does building and scaling look like today, and how do you even begin to future proof what you'll need in 12 months time, let alone 3, 5 years time. It's a very different ball game, and that stadium is going to keep changing week after week, right? So it's different. But to finish up today, I'd love to look at any advice that you can give for founders if they're thinking about marketing perspective and just some great principles of how they can use Linktree. And I'm putting my pen and paper to work as well. By the way, I definitely need to get a little bit of side action here as well to help me improve my Linktree. It's very basic at this
I
stage.
can
And I
do
want to
that.
see like, how do I monetize my audience? Podcast is going great. We're growing quickly, but social channels and everything else, it's pretty flat.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I mean, I don't presume to know anything about the algorithmic gods, but in terms of the way that I see people using Linktree really effectively, it's really about putting the link everywhere your audience is, and that could be as simple as like a business card with a QR code and your email signature, and then obviously across all of your sort of social platforms. But the beauty of that is you kind of get a centralized view of your audience, and you can see, I'm getting way more engagement from my email than I expected, and maybe I should be spending more time there, or sort of getting people more engaged on that surface, or realizing that I'm just getting completely flatline traffic from TikTok. So I either have to change my strategy. If I want somebody to come through this funnel and get to this website or consume this thing or purchase this thing or subscribe to the podcast, it kind of gives you an oversight of, I really need to be more action oriented and create content to like, attract that user through the funnel to your link tree and beyond, or to, subscribe. So the beauty of having a centralized management system and seeing all your inbound is you just get a sense of like what is actually working to some extent. What can I pivot? What can I change? But other than that, I mean, it's really hard to say the one way to use it, because you may have sort of totally different goals, but in terms of how the best way to use the product and the sort of content that you put on there, it's as simple as the most important thing is sits at the top. Like, it sounds dumb and it's very obvious, but we just see an inordinate amount of clicks to the top 1 to 3 links, and then content beneath obviously is less prioritized, and we see that in visitor traffic. So it's really about being thoughtful around like, what is the most important thing and impactful thing to your business right now that you want your customers to sort of be across, and that sits at the top of the link. Yeah, I don't know. That's kind of like the 101. I'm probably sure there's a million other ways. If you spoke to our creative partnerships team, they'd absolutely have some insights in terms of like funnel, and obviously branding is one. So you've got this persona and brand that you have across all your socials, like that should be represented in Linktree. And I think the other thing that's interesting about the benefit of a Linktree on your socials across all of them, you sort of have this like prismatic identity. On LinkedIn, you may be talking about one sort of definite flavor of content, industry, thought leadership, and these sorts of things. On Instagram, it may be more aspirational, or, little snippets of content, and same on TikTok. And so all of your inbound audiences may have different perspectives or aspects of what they sort of think and understand you to be. And Linktree is a place where we've said it, it's a bit kind of like hand wavy, but it's really a place for like all of you to come together, which is kind of nice. It's like the most complete picture of who you are. So I suppose just being sensitive to what your audience knows you for, and making sure that that experience when they land on the link tree, it's not like so discombobulating.
What you shared, there was two things that I love in that. And one is that comparative stuff. If you're able to use one link across various points of entry in different platforms and start to get a sense of where people then spin out to across all of your channels. And then when they get there, then what are they doing once they get through the other side as well? It's really insightful. To your point, you can look at one channel in isolation and go, it's driving X and Y. But compared to like literally getting that litmus test across channels and being able to compare that Linktree, I think is great. The second part there, it's all around context and how you use channels based on behavior of one, the algorithm, and two, the people using it. Like those little insights as far as the relationship you have with those people on that channel is always going to be different in the sense of how deep you can go, how long you can go, all those types of things. I think those two things for me are really important for founders to take away. So it's been really helpful for me, for one, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to find this interesting too. So Nicky, thanks so much for joining, mate. It's been so good.
Thank you for having me. If anyone wants to reach out to me, you can find me at Linktree/Nicky. I think I have my email there. You can also just look at my weird playlist because I think I'm cool and have good music. But ultimately, you can see all the things that I've got going on. And truthfully, if your core audiences are founders and especially emerging ones, I feel like I have a lot of war stories, or at least just perspectives and experiences that I wish I had sort of sought out and were told. So I'm really, really passionate about giving time and space to people. I'm doing this a lot with Australian founders, but like anyone from anywhere, I'm happy to have a chat. I just think it's so important for founders to be sharing stories and experiences with each other. It's not as though it's like us versus the world, but I think it can be very easy for things to get ahead of you, or for you to overanalyze certain things, or, once you have investment, it's like it becomes a marathon, and you're, instead of building a product, you're building a machine of sorts. Yeah. I'm putting myself out there. If anyone wants to chat, I'd love to.
That's amazing, and people should take that up. And it's actually good timing. I'm looking at doing a form of town hall, probably a physical event and maybe a digital one, where those types of questions can be asked, and we sort of rate that session. I would moderate it. So a combination of investors and founders and different expertise around the tables. Definitely be tapping you on the shoulder once we start doing that as well. But Nicky, thanks again. It's been a real treat, and I'm sure that this is going to be, definitely go down very well with a lot of people.
Nice one. Thanks so much. It was a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to Startups Decoded. If today's conversation helped you think differently, share it with a founder in your network. And don't forget to subscribe for real-world startup insights every week. We really value your support. If you're interested in partnering with us, email hello@startupsdecoded.com. I'm Andy Walsh. I'll see you next week.